I often think back to all of the financial mistakes that I've made throughout my life. And there's one consistent thing that I always say whenever I snap myself back to reality. And that is, if only I knew then what I know now, life would be so much different. I'd probably be living in a penthouse in Miami or somewhere tropical. I don't know. But in today's video, I'm going to be going through some of the biggest financial mistakes that I've made throughout the course of my life. If you're in your 20s and you're watching this video, I want you to scroll down and look at some of the comments that people are going to be leaving in this video talking about some of their biggest financial mistakes. If you can get started early, that's the best way to do it, which is a great segue into my first point, which is not investing early and often. I've made plenty of videos on my channel where I talk about how I was never taught about money. I was never taught how to invest. I was always taught that you stayed away from the stock market because that was only for people that had a lot of money. And if you tried to get into the market, you would lose everything. It was a lose-lose situation, and it was just like gambling. So I never really understood investing. I didn't know the stock market. And what's worse is I didn't want to learn. Sometimes I would hear people in passing just talking about investing, talking about the stock market, and I never really gave it a second thought. If I was able to flip that switch and start in an era like today, there's so much more information that's readily available at your fingertips, starting on social media. And then of course, if you're like me, I always have something like CNBC playing in the background where I'm just listening while I'm working. There were so many opportunities that were missed along the way because I wasn't educated on investing that I really lost an opportunity to get to the bag so much sooner. But like they always say, hindsight is always 20/20, and there's always something that we can look back on and wish that we could have done differently. The second mistake that I made happened right as soon as I finished my undergraduate degree and got my first real job. I was working in the pharmaceutical industry and I was starting to make a little bit of money. Not a lot, but much more than I had ever made up until that point. I mean, that was my first real job that I had benefits, paid vacation. I mean, you name it. I thought I was on top of the world. And one of the best things that came with that was a 401k. Now, I will admit that I didn't invest as much as I should have back then. But one of the things that I didn't do that I regret to this day is I didn't understand what my investments were. I let my company's administrator pick a mutual fund, and I think it was a target date fund, like a 2040 fund or something like that. And I just let my money go in and I would check it maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. Didn't understand the fees associated with it, didn't understand the risk that was associated with that target date fund, didn't understand the mix of the investments inside of that fund, nothing. And the worst part about it, now that I sit here and I think about it, is I just really didn't care at that point. I just knew money was going into an account and it would be there for me when I was ready to retire. And that's a mistake. If you're investing in a 401k, you need to understand everything about that particular plan that your organization offers. Understanding the fees, understanding the investment options, and more importantly, understanding what is the lowest cost index fund that you can invest in outside of a mutual fund that's going to cost you much less money. Trust me, it's worth the investigation and the due diligence on your part to spend an hour on the phone with your plan administrator and have them walk you through that process. I did that, but it was much later in the process, and I lost probably about 5 years of understanding my investments before I took that action. Don't make that same mistake that I did. The next mistake that I made, so many people make this mistake. And it's right around this time of year when that mistake is made. And that is when you get your raise, I didn't invest that money either into my 401k or used it as an investment vehicle for something else. See, nowadays, whenever I get a raise, I don't spend that extra money. I continue to live on the same amount of money that I was living on the year prior. I mean, we're in 2026 right now, and I have to think about it, but I believe that I'm still living off of my 2023 salary. And the last few raises that I've gotten, I've used that money to increase my contribution and my Roth 401k. I've used that money to increase my investments and my brokerage accounts. I try my best to make sure that whenever I get that raise, that I'm not using that to increase my lifestyle. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I don't go out and spend money. It's a little bit different for me right now that I'm 45, as opposed to whenever I was 30. I was much more aligned to making sure that I followed my budget to a T, because I had bills at that point, cars. I had other bills that were going out that I just don't have today. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I don't go out and buy things and spend money, or it's not something that we should strive to do. But going out and trying to increase your lifestyle just because you get a little bit more money, now that's dangerous, and that's something that can prevent you from actually getting to the bag. Getting to the bag is much more important than to have things in the now. Trust me. It really is. The next mistake that I made is similar to death by 1,000 cuts. You sign up for all these subscription services, all these fees that are coming out of your bank account every single month or charged to your credit card. It could be yearly credit card fees, and you just kind of forget all about it. I mean, you have Amazon Prime nowadays, you got Apple Music, you got Spotify, you got Hulu, you got all of these things that we're signed up for. And we're in a subscription society right now. I mean, I think I even saw the other day, which is crazy, where some car makers are going to start making you pay a subscription to use the radio inside of your car. I mean, we were already to the point where you have to have a subscription to use a remote starter that's already in your car, which is insane. So I'm not surprised that this is the next thing that's happening, which I think is absolutely crazy. But those are the types of things that come out of your checking account or your savings account or hit your credit card every single month that we ignore, that add up over a long period of time. We just started 2026. Do me a favor, go grab and download either your credit card statement or your bank statement or both from 2025, and just go through each one and see what all subscriptions were charged to each one of those accounts for 2025. Add them up and see what it cost you. My guess, it's gonna be at least $1,000, maybe more. And you may say, hey, that's the price for the service. And I use those services, I want them, completely fine. For me, and like a lot of other people, when we get these services, we kind of forget that we have them and we don't use it as much as we think. The next financial mistake that I made was getting into credit card debt. I talk about this every chance that I get. I've made several videos on this channel about getting in credit card debt in my 20s and how I was a young kid on a college campus. I did my tour, I walked over, I saw a credit card company sitting there, I signed up, and that was my very first foray into credit cards, and it was downhill from that point forward. And it took me until my late 20s, early 30s to finally clear all that credit card debt that I had. And I made a promise to myself at that point that I would never put myself in credit card debt ever again. And since my 30th birthday, I have not paid 1 cent in credit card interest. But prior to that point, I paid thousands. I mean, I had maxed out credit cards. My wife had maxed out credit cards. We were paying the monthly minimum every single month because that's all we could afford, because we had so much debt going on at that point in time. And all of the money that we were paying, 90% of that was going to interest, and the other 10% was going to the principal. It's not a way to live, and it's really draining when I sit back and I think about it. And that was a huge mistake. Paying credit card interest, having multiple car payments, having subscriptions coming out of my account, and wondering why I don't have very much money at the end of the month. It's crazy. And then the last financial mistake that I made back whenever I was younger, that now that I look back and I think I wish I would have done this differently, was I waited so long to switch jobs. And I believe that that happens to so many people. We get comfortable, we get that job, we're starting to make some money. I remember I was making more money than I ever had in my life. I had finally cracked that 6-figure number. Work was hard, but it was something that I was good at. It was something that I can do, and I just stayed. And after a while, I started to think, I probably hit a ceiling here, and I'm doing more work for the organization than what they're actually paying me. And whenever I went out there on the open market, I realized that I could make 1.5 times more than what I was making at my current job to actually switch organizations. And that's what I did, and I never looked back. So one of the things that I want you guys to think about and to consider, especially heading into this new year, if you've been in an organization for 3 to 5 years, you feel kind of stagnant. You're doing really good work, but you're kind of stagnant and you're not really seeing the money come the way that you want it to come. Don't be afraid to put yourself out on the market and look for other roles at other organizations, because 9 times out of 10, and those of you that are watching that are in corporate America or have been in corporate America before know that people from the outside that get hired to come in oftentimes make much more money to take that role as opposed to someone that's promoted from within. I don't know. What do you guys think? Those are some of the biggest financial mistakes that I made in my 20s and in my 30s. And I'd be curious to hear, what are some of the mistakes that you guys have made? And what do you guys think about the mistakes that I mentioned? Did I hit on most of the ones that you were thinking about? Or are there some others that a lot of people make that I should have listed in today's video? Leave your comments down below and let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.